Hello and welcome back to the Listening to Your Gut podcast. I am so pumped because we are going to be talking about a topic we've never discussed on the podcast before. So this is new for me. I'm just learning about it, and this is probably going to most likely be new for you as the listener and viewer because I don't know too many people who know about the body of nine, okay? Other than my girl Safrianna. So she's here and she's going to be sharing all about it. We're going to geek out about it together. And yeah, I'm super pumped. So welcome to the podcast, Safriana.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to geek out about Body of Nine. It's like one of my most life-changing topics I've ever learned about. And so when I get to share it with the world, it just excites me so much. So thank you for your interest.
Absolutely. Well, and I just want to give kind of like a like set the stage, if you will, here and kind of share how we connected. So we both are connected to Erin Porter, Erin Nicole coaching on Instagram. And I was part of her I think it was a 3 day kind of workshop experience. And you were one of the guest speakers. And I instantly, once I heard your topic, I was like, okay, I'm sold. Let me continue to keep like listening to her and hearing all this because this is like my kind of jam, my type of thing. So that's kind of how we came to be. And then I reached out to you and I was like, hello, we have to get together and record a podcast. Like this is a must. So, and
Yes.
here we are. Here it is.
Here we are. Yes. And I
Yeah.
so appreciate that because this is definitely one of those things. The more curious about it you get, the more you start to realize it's founded in reality. Like you can actually see the proof of it around you, the more that you learn about it. And it's not something that, like, I've gone way into the deep end, Kelly. Like, I am so involved in the Body of Nine community now and like learning everything I can and talking about it all the time. But it's something that even in an afternoon, if you were to commit an afternoon or read the book, like you can begin to have an open curiosity about other people in a way that you never have before. And I'm like, that's my mission is to make us more curious and compassionate towards one another.
I love it. I love it. And I also, I mean, you'll talk about this, I'm sure, because I'm gonna ask you about it, but I love that there is, but there isn't like kind of a resemblance in terms of the fact that there's nine body types to the enneagram. There's nine enneagram types. And I know, I mean, that was one of the first things when you started talking. I was like, oh, so this is connected to enneagram. And right away you were like, this is not like if you think that your enneagram is the same as your body type, it might not necessarily be. And so
Right.
then from there, I was like, okay, now I'm like, now she's got me all the way reeled in. Here we go down this rabbit hole of learning about the body of nine. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think the greatest thing for us to do would be to start by just explaining what is the body of nine. Like, can you give
Yeah.
kind of like the history of it? And yeah, you do such a great
Absolutely.
job of that.
So, Body of Nine, of course, is a company name. It is
Yeah.
a brand name for the study of this reignited wisdom. This is ancient knowledge that was somehow lost to time, or records were lost, or something.
Wow.
And we started to come into it recently where there's little hints in history. The Temple of Man in Egypt is actually somewhere where we see the roots of this because you can actually see these different posed bodies in the Temple of Man in Egypt that
Whoa.
seem to indicate the natural number postures or the zones of activation, as we call them. So, Body of Nine is studying this ancient wisdom that there are nine physiologically different types of human beings.
Yeah.
I also have theory that it does seem to apply to many of our animals, but that's a whole other topic. I started typing cats, and it's really
Whoa.
fun. But anyway, we've reignited this wisdom and started to actually study it in the humans. And what we're starting to see is that, yeah, the body actually physiologically changes as it develops in these very subtle ways, and it doesn't match your parents. So even if you look like your parents,
Mhm.
if you have a biological family that you grew up with and people say, oh, you look so much like your mom or you look so much like your dad, but not exact.
Yeah.
What's really interesting that fascinated me most of all when I initially started learning this was that unless there's eight or more children in the family, you do not match your parents. The numbers start to repeat after there's nine people in the family system
Oh,
between parents and children and there's,
okay.
the siblings. So kids these days don't really grow up in big families. So we actually tend to skip numbers and generations completely.
Okay.
And we'll have these clusters of families that have like six numbers in them across the grandparents, the parents, and the children.
Yeah.
And so we're not seeing all nine as a part of the family systems. Whereas in ye olde days, right, when we had really big families and really
Yep.
like tight knit communities, you would see all of the gifts of all nine types of humans together.
Yeah.
So it's something that as we're reigniting it now and we're starting to actually document, we're starting to actually, photograph the differences in the faces and the
Yeah.
the bone structure, the
Yeah.
muscles and fascia that are actually impacted. We're starting to see more and more consistency across the board, across gender, across, ethnicity,
Yeah.
just there are nine different types of humans. And, you mentioned the Enneagram, and Enneagram seems to actually be an offshoot of this knowledge, where it
Ah.
was like almost taken and tried to be turned into a personality test, but it's like slightly off. And the thing about any personality test is you can go take it again, right? And if your mood has changed or you've gone
Right.
through a life shift.
Yep.
Like I think about Myers-Briggs. I am a licensed clinician and I used to love like assessments, right? Assessments for
Yeah.
getting to know my
Sure.
clients. And Myers-Briggs, you can be really judgmental because you're out of tune with your feelings. So you're
Uh-huh.
more logical, but then you start to gain emotional awareness and suddenly you're scoring as a F.
Yeah.
So it's like this is something that's so routed in your body that even though you can learn how to actually embody other natural numbers, that's
Yeah.
what we call these zones of leadership is your natural number, you are still born with one online.
Yeah.
And that actually shaped your body as you were growing up. Yeah.
That is okay. Continue to be mind blown here as you share. That's incredible. So, uh, tell us then, like, I guess the next step is why know your natural number, right? Like,
Yeah.
what by knowing this, how does this help an individual to be?
Yeah. Oh, so many ways.
Yeah.
So many ways. So I'll just start with a story of how I learned my natural number. So I
Yeah.
was I was signed up for a book project, like a collaborative multi-authored book, and I was writing my chapter and they're like, bonus, you get to have your natural number identified by one of your co-authors. And I'm like, what does that mean? Right? Never heard of this. And that's how I met Susan. And she gets me on a call and she's like, wiggle your body. Or she's having me do all these things on camera. I'm like, what is going on? And then she's like, okay, so we believe you have natural number nine. We're going to sit you down and talk about it. And I'm like, okay. So she starts describing it and she's like, you literally balance the weight of the world in your shoulders and like you can feel if things are unified or if they're out of balance and you know how to move things back towards balance and you're all about harmony. And I'm like, isn't everyone? And I'm like having this light bulb moment of, wait, not everyone does this. But she's saying all these things that I'm like, yeah, that's okay. And so she starts talking about the center of my back being my center of leadership. And I'm like, huh, that's where I have my tattoo. Apparently, but natural number nines get tattoos all the time on their nine region. Um,
Oh.
and so I'm still like, okay, well, that's kind of weird, right? Like that I picked of all the spots on my body that I could get a tattoo, that I picked
Yeah.
that spot.
Yeah.
And I'm like just listening to this, and she's telling me all about myself, and I'm like, okay, cool, what next, right? And then the next morning, I woke up and I felt like an entirely different person. It was like I had been seen for the first time in my life for the core nature of who I was under everything that people had piled on top of me.
Yeah.
And then it just started to unfold from there. So my spouse was identified at the same time, and our whoo, our whole relationship changed like practically overnight because we were having a lot of communication problems. And it was because I was seeing this giant big picture because that's what my natural number does. My
Yeah.
natural number is uniquely gifted to literally hold. We are the containers of the universe. So we're
Wow.
literally holding the entire big picture and our picture is so zoomed out and big that details, forget it, right?
Yeah.
So on the flip side, my spouse is a natural number one, which is the throat, and they are so vulnerable and they get so ashamed. And so they'd get so ashamed about something and they'd come to me and I'd be like, it's not a big deal. Like, you don't have to be ashamed about that at all. Like, why are you? No. And
Yeah.
I'd go into the big picture thinking and try and explain, like, you don't have to be worked up over this because blah, blah, blah. And they would just get more ashamed. Well, why didn't I see that? Right. And I'm like, oh, we were like button heads about it all the time because I'm just trying to be compassionate and harmony and balance and like what I do. And they're
Right.
just trying to be themselves, which is vulnerable and open and like dealing with the imperfections of life.
Yeah.
And we just did not get that about each other. So, with this sudden new knowledge of this fact that we were living in two different body models that
Yeah.
processed things differently, it started to get us more curious like, how else do we process things differently? So, all of that to say, when you learn your natural number,
Hmm.
you start to understand how you use your eyes and why you use your eyes.
Mm.
So we all use our eyes for a different reason. Each natural number uses their eyes for a different reason. 1 through 4 use them to connect. They will make eye contact to connect.
Yeah.
5 through 9 use eye contact to gather information, to get curious, to assess, to, do a variety of different things, but they don't need it to connect. They can do an activity and feel connected without making eye contact. You don't give a 1 through 4 eye contact, they're like, "Why do they hate me? What's going on?" Right? And that I think really speaks to a lot of parent-child relationships. If you have a parent that thinks eye contact is important to
Uh,
feel respected,
yep.
and their child doesn't naturally give eye contact, what does that parent usually do? Look at me when you're talking to me.
Right.
They get
Yeah.
upset about it.
Yeah.
So that's like the number one thing that we start to realize is, oh, we use our eyes differently. And that alone starts to change everything. It also puts major perspective into body language. And, I feel bad for all these body language experts out there that are like, this means this. Actually, it only means that 1 out of 9 times. The other 9 times you're misinterpreting it. So I put a lot of faces on when I'm like talking and stuff because that's, we look for engagement
Yeah.
when we're watching or listening to something. But for me, if I'm listening to you and I'm like really going deep listening to you, I look bored as hell. Like my eyes look glazed over, my face looks neutral, and that's what nines do naturally because they're diffusing their eyes to take in the whole big picture. If they look like this,
Yep.
that's going to focus them in on one little thing, and their job is to see the big picture.
Yeah.
So it's like each knowing how and why you're doing things in your body or sensing things different ways really starts to shift your perspective. You start to learn, am I more crippled by shame? Am I more crippled by disappointment? Or am I more crippled by fear? Huge.
It's
My
deep.
my spouse is a shame number. My other partner is a disappointment number, and I'm a fear number. So we're
Yeah.
all processing the same event in totally different ways.
Yeah.
Parenting. Oh my gosh. Imagine knowing, your kid's actual nature and knowing how to raise them according to their nature rather than your nurture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Huge. So there's so many reasons to learn, like why you would learn your natural number because it brings you home into your body. It
Yeah.
enhances your communication skills. It improves your relationships, makes you
Yeah.
more curious in your relationships, and it just expands your worldview to really appreciating how different we are.
I love that. Oh my gosh. It leads me to a whole boatload of more like other questions too. So like now I'm thinking, I mean, yeah, of course it's going to help you to understand yourself better, but when it comes to like relationships, are there, how like I guess you could say sometimes with enneagram and really any kind of, personality type, quiz and whatnot, are there certain body types that I don't know, get each other better than others or like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is something that I've been really deep diving into is like a relationship chart between each of the numbers,
Yeah, yeah.
because each pair has a unique type of relationship and some threads of similarity and
Okay.
some major differences.
Yeah.
So there are some, I mean, each pair could be complementary in a certain way, but I see a lot of 1-6 couples and a lot of 2-9 couples. So those are the two that I can like really speak particularly to because
Okay.
so 1 and 6 share they share some very interesting things. They're both sort of like what's happening right here in front of me. That's my focus. I'm going
Yeah.
to focus on what's happening right here in front of me. So ones have a very focused eye gaze. They can get they're all about awe and wonder. So they're like, "Wow, this is so amazing. It's new. I'm excited about it."
I feel like that's me. From what I read, I
From
feel
what
like
you
that
read.
might be me. I don't know.
Can't discount it.
Yeah.
So just looking at your face, I can't discount that one. But yeah, so ones, they're like they honor people and they're just there kind of in the moment for what's perfect or imperfect, and they really struggle to see the perfection in themselves. So they
Mm,
really need to kind of keep going and keep bringing in, more information and from source and engaging and stuff.
mm.
Natural number 6 is what's alive in the moment. And I joke that sixes have kind of two modes. They're either on and they're doing something, or they're asleep. And there's like no in between for them. And so six is like, this is really exciting right now. Woo! Right? Like
Yeah.
it's alive. The energy is there and they're ramped up. And so a natural number one sees that and is like, wow, I'm in the awe and wonder of this moment now because you're excited. So I'm excited. So they make a really cute pair because they can really like go with what's in the moment and just kind of flow with that in a really unique way. Whereas for me, when someone changes their mind that rapidly, I'm like, whoa, like not quite so much as an eight, like an eight and six pair can be really, really challenging because eights are the slowest to make a decision. They
Oh,
have to feel the wisdom in their body and it
okay.
has to be like really deeply felt in their body before they can move forward. So a six is like, I'm working on this. Nope, that's no longer alive. I'm zipping off to do this. And the eight can be like, whoa,
Wait a
why are
second.
you changing your mind? I need like a day to change
Yeah.
plans.
Yep.
So that's a pair that I don't see as much, but I do know some couples who are a 6-8 pair.
Okay.
2 and 9. So, like I said, I'm a natural nine. Nines see this big picture, and part of the gift in that and the curse in that is that a nine can literally put themselves in anyone else's shoes with pretty relative ease, depending on their emotional capacity, if they're empathic or energy sensitive, things like that. But we can really see other people's perspectives pretty easily.
Yeah.
So we chameleon, and a natural number 2 is literally a mirror. So one of the fun things about a two, I love testing and figuring out someone's a two because when you do the physical in-person test, you dance with them. And if they can mirror you perfectly while making eye contact, you know they're a two. They don't ever have to look at their feet. They naturally just stay locked onto you with their abdominal muscles. I'm so bad with muscle names. That's the one thing I need to like really get in my head, but it's these like ribs right here at the bottom of the rib cage,
Yeah.
the abs here, and they push that out and they lock on, and then they just move. They just lock on and they move with the eyes, and they can just
Oh,
follow someone. So a 2 and a 9 get that reflective quality of one another because the two can just become the mirror for other people and forget themselves,
yeah.
and a 9 can become the chameleon and forget themselves because they're like, oh, well, your point of view is great. I want to have your point of view for right now. And then they forget that their own point of view is valuable.
Yeah.
So 2 and 9 really understand each other in that kind of special way. So those are like the two that come to mind for me right away. But yes, like each pair is going to have its own dynamics. What's really interesting is we don't currently have any recorded cases of two people of the same number having kids together.
Oh, okay.
It's almost this like, opposites attract
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
when you're with somebody who's the same as you, there's an understanding and a comfort and a familiarity, potentially. Some natural numbers butt heads more than others, like with the like types,
Yeah.
whereas others seem to just kind of vibe. I don't know if that's an individual person or if it really is a number thing, but um yeah, like you don't see romantic relationships between people that are super duper alike because there's no interest there,
Yeah.
right? And they might date, but they don't tend to last very long romantically. I imagine they just kind of are like, oh, I know everything there is to know here.
Yeah. Hi.
Bored.
Next. That's interesting. Okay, so
Yeah.
I guess that leads me to another question that I have, which would be, I was thinking as you were sharing like the six, is there any connection that I assume there's gotta be some connection, but like to human design? I feel like
Mm.
some of what you said with like the 6, because I'm picturing if let's theoretically say maybe I'm a 1, I feel like what you described the 6 as, my husband could be that, right? So, there we go, there's a match.
Right.
But and he's also, I'm pretty sure I have to check, but I think he's a manifesting generator, and that sounds to me like what a manifesting generator often does, which is like, I'm interested in something, now I'm done with it, now I'm moving on to the next. Is
Yeah.
I don't know, have you seen any research or any connection between the 2?
So that's something I'm interested in human design. I love archetypal systems, which is
Yeah,
unsurprising as a nine because I love to understand how the whole universe works and
yeah,
all of the rules so that I can play.
yep,
Um, and yeah, there's definitely like manifesting generators and generators probably have a lot of overlap with some of the numbers. So
okay,
it's like, bear with me a moment. I'm going to use a video game analogy.
do it.
So you're creating a character in a video game. It's one of those video games where you get to design every aspect.
Yeah,
So you pick your fantasy race, right? You're an orc or you're a dwarf or you're an elf or you're a human, right? There's all these different body models
yeah,
that you pick from.
yeah,
So you pick orc. Okay, cool. Now you get to go in and you're going to pick your skill set. You're going to pick your class. You're going to like decide, what the origin story was for your character.
yeah,
Your natural number is like your race, your fantasy race in that video game, right? It's literally the body model that you
yeah,
came in with.
yep,
Your human design, your astrology, all of that inner working is more like your skill set or your class on top of that. So it's modifying, it's like an extra gift package that the body now gets to work with.
okay,
So another way to look at this, the body is the filtration system. So
okay,
all of us take in information, but we filter it through our body. We literally usually filter it through our eyes and our ears, right? Our nose, like we filter it through the body,
yeah,
and then we have a response to it. So your human design is going to augment how your natural number shows up. And another layer of that is every person is either empathic,
mm,
energy sensitive, or both. And in a super rare case, neither, but it's like very, very rare that people are none of those.
right,
So a empathic natural number six versus an energy sensitive number six takes in information in a slightly different way because part of the physiological gift of a six, they're the chest,
mhm,
is they're like taking in the information that's in front of them and they actually feel it through their chest somehow. They
wow,
might feel the emotions or they might feel the energy or they might feel both, but they're feeling what's happening in the room in front of them in some capacity.
okay,
If they're a generator on top of that, they're probably going to then go be speedy and like do things about that. Or if they're a manifesting generator, they're going to take what's coming in and they're going to get the ideas and they're going to go work with the ideas, right?
yeah,
Like a generator is more the motor, whereas the manifesting generator is more like the ideas constantly coming in.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's like augmented, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. So there is some connection, which is,
Yes.
what I was kind of thinking there was. So which is so cool. I mean, you and I could geek out on all this stuff all day long because I mean, I love this. Like I wish, I'm 33. I wish I would have learned this stuff
Yeah.
that I'm learning now, the body of nine, like my human design, which I do know that. I know the enneagram, but like more like astrology I'm trying to now get into too, because like once you start learning this stuff, it's incredible how much you realize, whoa, that does describe me like to a T, you know?
And
So
then where it doesn't, you get to get curious, you
yeah,
get to explore like,
yeah.
is that true for me? And that's the thing that
Yeah.
I think is missing in our society right now is that self-inquiry. Like, let me get to know myself, not what society has told me, not what my parents have told me. And I know this is another archetype system where we're telling you this is how you are, but we're also inviting you to get so curious about it. And if you really feel like, no, that's not me, we got it wrong. Because when we start describing your natural number, if you're not like, how do they know this about me? We don't have it right.
Right. Yeah.
And there are, because it is physiological, there are some overlaps. So both 1 and 8 tend to have really distinct jaw lines.
Okay.
Most of the other ones have more soft eyes. Twos and fives can have really big, big eyes. Nines can too. So, like, if we're just, narrowing it down to one little aspect, we can get a wrong guess about somebody very quick, which
Yeah.
is why we want to have that deeper inquiry and get curious. But that's like any system. Why don't
Yeah.
we just invite in more self inquiry and curiosity?
I love that. Yeah, it is. It is totally inviting you to be more curious, which is why I got real curious and asked you to come on here because I was like, we need more of this. We need more.
Yeah, I
So,
totally agree.
so yeah, I think, I mean, now I would love for you to, I don't know because I'm not someone who is trained like you, but what is the process of getting typed?
Yeah.
Finding your body type, like what you mentioned eyes, face, and movement, but
Hmm.
like what does that look like for someone who's like, God, I need to find this out like ASAP. Like
Yeah.
what does this entail?
Yeah, so there are two ways that you can be identified. One is in person with
Yeah.
a practitioner,
Yep.
which there are not many of us. That's the only problem with this information right now, is
Yeah.
like we're literally trying to train people to be able to properly identify because it's not a quiz. It's
Yeah.
something we're actually like looking at your body and we're seeing what's happening. So
Yeah.
in person or online are the two ways that you can have a professional who's trained in this actually look for what's going on.
Yep.
And the process in person is that we put our hands on your shoulders and we like wiggle your body, we make eye contact, we tell you to close your eyes, and then we wiggle you more. We push on you from different places and we see where your natural resistance comes in. And you have no idea. Like you're just resisting because we'll
Yeah.
say, don't let us push you back. Now
Yeah.
we're not trying to like shove you, but we're like trying to see, do you lean forward like this, or
Yeah.
do you just hinge at your hips and go straight back? That's what happens with like 7 can do that, 8 can do that, 9 can do that. So then we're like, oh, they went backwards, interesting, let me get more curious there. So we fine tune it and we start to just keep getting curious about the body. And there are certain physiological things we can look at, like the collarbone on natural number threes is very pokey. Like it actually pokes up right here more than most people
Oh,
because their activation zone is right there. It's even hard for me to like lift that part.
yeah.
But it's so natural for them. And because of that, as they grow up, their collarbones curve
Oh,
more than the other 8 types of people. So
okay.
we'll look for little things like that, like what's going on with the collarbones, what's going on with the jawline, how do
Yeah.
they breathe? That's all stuff that we'll look for.
Oh.
Online, we essentially, it's a very similar process, but we can't put our hands on you. So we also, just quick side note, if the idea of someone putting their hands on you in that way makes you go, ugh, you might be a very particular natural number. That's a clue that we use in person
Okay.
is if we come in close and they immediately back up,
Uh-huh.
it's a clue about a particular natural number because
Oh.
eights really have a big shield. They have a big bubble and they're like, don't come in my bubble
Oh.
at all. Like, please
Okay.
no. Until they really love and trust you, and then they will invite you in. But if you go in without consent, that's like I mean, even more of a violation than
Yeah.
the other 8 would experience it. Because the other 8 are just gonna be like, "Yo, why are you in my space?" And
Sure.
eight's
Yeah.
like, "Whoa," having a response to someone just
Yeah.
came into my bubble. But anyway, so online we have you look into your camera,
Yep.
and we might have you smile. We might, because there's different kinds of smiles.
Yeah.
Natural number sixes tend to have really straight smiles. um
Oh.
Fours tend to have like, I've noticed almost this cup like cheek. Natural number twos, when they smile, their cheeks bunch up towards their eyes. uh so we'll look for things like that. Threes actually activate through the smile, so they have a huge, broad smile. I'm wanting to say Anne Hathaway is a 3, and she just has like one of the biggest smiles in the world.
Oh.
Um, so we'll then have you stand like where we can see you from head to knee, and we'll ask you to do a series of movements. We'll ask you to breathe, turn to the side, turn to the other side, spin around. Like we're just trying to make you move as much as we can without making you dizzy, right? In different ways. Like for me, because I was identified online, as was my actually all of us were all in my family system because Susan and Martin live in Montana. We live in Maryland. So we've been out for in-person training since then, but it was
Okay.
all online for us.
Okay.
For my identification, they looked at my face, they looked at how passive I looked because they're just like, just be how you normally would be. Don't make any funny faces unless that's what you would do, kind of thing. And then they started to narrow it down and they had me do shoulder movements. So nines have really and the movement comes down into our fingers because we're
Okay.
all through the shoulders. So they were having me roll my shoulders in a figure eight, which most people can't do as fluidly as a nine can because that's not their zone of activation.
Okay.
Um, I don't even remember what they did with my spouse, but my other partner was super funny because we were in the same room. He's a two.
Uh-huh.
Twos are all about engagement in the moment. Like they're just there to show up. And
Mhm.
so they're like, okay, stand up and we're gonna have Safriana stand with you. And they're like, okay, now look at each other. And I looked at him and he looked at me and they knew immediately what he was because of how his face responded.
Yeah.
My metamor, so my spouse's other partner, polyamorous, if you
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
for those of you following along, um, when we were identifying her, it was actually my first time practicing identifying people, and so my mentors were online watching. They had her come up to the camera and take a breath, and they already knew what she was. And then they're like, "All right, Safriana, it's your turn." And I'm like,
Whoa.
but for them it was so quick because they could see where she breathed from. Because sixes, when they breathe, they go like this.
Okay.
They lift right here, whereas other people tend to breathe. I breathe more into the back. Fours breathe really low into the deep belly. Like we all kind of breathe differently. So they could see right away because they've been doing this for o- over 20 years now, and they've worked with close to 10,000 people. So it's like they've got it down. But yes, that's the kind of stuff we're looking for is like these little micro movements or, oh, can you bend your body easily here? Can you hinge there? Can you do certain movements? And some are just easier for certain natural numbers than others. And if you can't do it, we're like, okay, unless there's a major injury, of course, then that can make it a little bit harder to identify people.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I want to save the not the best, but like the biggest piece for last, which is like I would love for you to identify kind of like, I don't know if you can, like each type, like, you know, the hallmark things for each type. But
Yeah.
before we get there, my other question is related to kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier about like which types kind of attract to each other, but
Mhm.
now more so like, are there, you know how like an enneagram there's the triads, are the, and
Mhm.
I know you mentioned earlier the first four use eye contact, right?
Mhm.
And then 5 through 9 don't. I mean, they use eyes, but not for the same reason, not
Right.
like connecting. So is there beyond that, is there any other kind of like, I don't know, either groupings or subgroupings?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is where we get into a lot of fun and we're like continuing to break
Okay.
it down. So there's the shame, fear, disappointment triads.
Yeah.
And that's like when you roll your emotions backward to their core, you'll find that they are one of those three. And
Okay.
of course, all of us experience all three of those. But one, five, and nine are the head numbers. So five is here on the back of the head, seven is here in the third eye. One is in the throat, and those are head numbers, and they have a tendency to go into shame very easily. Different flavors of shame,
Mhm.
um, but shame nonetheless. And then we have the upper torso numbers, which are three, six, and nine, and those are our fear numbers.
Okay.
And then we have 2, 4, and 8, which are disappointment numbers, and they also happen to be in the lower body.
Okay.
So it's like there's those regions and
Yeah.
then the feelings. We also have a distinction between the odd numbers. The odd numbers experience things more energetically.
Mhm.
Uh, they don't have quite as much of an attachment to their body. In fact, most most of the head numbers, when you ask them about their body, they're like, "What body? What are you talking about? Like, I don't pay attention to what's from here down." Versus the even numbers are body-based numbers,
Mm.
so they experience um, a lot more depth.
Wow.
So 157, and then 369, and
Mhm.
then 248. So those are our little clusters of sort of similar.
Mhm.
And then 369 represent an energetic trio in a way,
Mhm.
because three's focus is here. They're literally like so zoned in. I love to give the example of Chef Omri, the chocolate guy. This man like does the tiniest little details. He paints everything. Like when he builds a dragon made out of chocolate, it has every single scale accounted for. That is natural number three to a T. Like they're so good at those fine details.
Uh-huh.
Six is here. What's alive in the moment in front of me? And how can I play with that energy? And then nine is like the whole big picture. So you need all three of those iterations in order to bring things from the big picture down into the focus.
Mhm.
Uh, there's also this whole thing called the transformational flow that we have just figured out. There's not a book about it right now. Susan is in the process of writing the book, and we've all been talking about it behind the scenes on the Body of Nine team.
Oh.
But the transformational flow is something that even if you never knew your natural number, you could apply to decision making, you could apply it to retreat structure, you could apply it to a business meeting, you can apply it to literally like deciding what you're going to do next summer. Like it's this flow that takes you through all nine gifts of the natural numbers from the point of the big picture all the way through all of the details and back to integration and the big picture again. And that represents these different pairs. So it goes 1 5, 2 6, 3 7, 4 8, and then 9. And it technically begins with 9 because again, 9 is the container for everything.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, there's all kinds of little things,
Oh.
and I'm working on my own stuff right now with the natural numbers as they relate to moon phases and our relationship with light and shadow. Like
Oh my
this
God.
goes really, really, really deep.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear more about that. And yeah, I mean, and then you'll be at the forefront of sharing that and
Yes.
disseminating that information. So I
Yes. I
I
love teaching.
I love that. I can tell you do. I can tell. I can tell. I love it.
I was a public school teacher for nearly a decade before I went into being a therapist, and now whatever it is that I do, being me.
Fellow teacher. Yep. There
Hmm.
I mean, that's what I am currently right now. So yeah, I can tell it. I can tell it.
I
I love
love
it.
it.
So, all right, I'm gonna start to get us kind of into the home stretch here, and I would love for you to, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of share like I know that's hard to do. I hate to say it and make it sound like, oh, just share a brief synopsis because there's so much to share. But like, if you could package each of the nine body types into like a couple core things, what are some things that we would look for to like notice in people, if you
Yeah.
will?
Yeah. So natural number one, again, the throat region,
Yep.
tend to have very soft, receptive eyes when they're activated because they're really honoring somebody. They're about honor, awe, wonder. And they also have this direct connection to source or God or whatever you want to call it, that they're able to kind of access the information that everything is perfect, but they struggle to apply that to themselves. That's their biggest challenge in life is realizing that they are perfect themselves just as everything else is. And they are they're very idealistic dreamers a lot of the time because they do see that possibility for perfection.
Uh-huh.
We tend to see a very straight jawline on a one.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, very soft, receptive eyes. They tilt their chin up when they're connecting with somebody and they make their eyes nice and soft. Natural number one needs a full minute of eye contact to establish a deep connection. And that is really hard for natural number ones because almost no one makes a minute of eye contact these days.
Yeah.
Almost no one.
Yeah.
So they really have to invite it in. Natural number twos have these beautiful aptly cheeks and usually very bright, receptive eyes. When they're open for engagement, but they're not yet engaged, their face looks very neutral and passive, like a natural number nine's activated face. This
Mhm.
is where the body language experts need a lesson on this because that means two totally different things. So when they engage, their eyes immediately sparkle, their cheeks go in, and they'll smile usually at you. And like I said earlier, they're here in the body. And so their ribs actually tend to jut out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And they can do this really fluid movement in the middle of their body that no one else can, because they can actually almost like make the two halves of the body hinge in different directions
Whoa,
because of that musculature that's developed there.
wild.
They are all about dynamic engagement in the moment. They just want you to be who you are. And they know that the person you are right now is going to be totally different 5 minutes from now because we're always changing. So
Yeah.
they're just about what's here. So in that transformational flow, two and six go together because two is about engaging in the moment and six is about what's alive in the moment. So they're both reacting and responding to what's here.
Okay.
Three is all about focus and joy. They have this wellspring of joy. They actually activate up into the smile. So their region is here in the collarbone. It goes right up into the smile. And they have this jolt of energy when they make eye contact with you. So I
Mhm.
said one needs a full minute of eye contact, two, instant, three, when they look into your eyes for a couple of seconds and they really make a connection, they can almost read your soul, and it's this wellspring of wisdom and joy that exists within them. They're great at asking questions and teasing out details because they're that focus.
Yeah.
So they'll be like, well, we don't have enough information to focus here. Let me ask you a question and pull the focus down. So
Okay.
our natural number three, we only have one natural number three in the body of nine team right now. So he gets to ask all, like he's always we're calling him up like, hey, what are we missing here? Because we need these fine-tuned details. Ask me questions.
Um,
So they're really good at teasing out information in that unique way.
okay.
Um, Natural number fours, of course, I'm going into each of the numbers a little bit as I'm talking about them. So fours drop within. They're the low abdomen. So in yogic anatomy, we would call this the dantian. It's the overlap between the root and the sacral chakras. It's like if you've ever done breath work and they have you put your hands like in your lap in the front like this,
Yeah.
you're holding your four. So natural number fours are all about intimacy, about emotional depth, about like really the juiciness of the shadow. Like they're not so afraid of going into the shadow because they literally close their eyes to go in and access their feelings on the regular. They tend to have really fluttery eyes for that reason because they're dropping in all the time. And they just have a lot of emotional wisdom. They understand that we're all connected on a fundamental level through almost like a web or a network, and they bring that gift of similar to a nine, like that unity piece,
Yeah.
but really in the emotions, like in the deep feeling. Five, back of the head here, they're all about congruence and creating frameworks. So our fives love to build frameworks. They love to be helpful and make sure that we all have the information that we need. So fives disconnect with their eyes when they need to go up and access information. We've called it doing like control F, right? Like I need to find something. So as I said, one through four, they actually use their eyes to create a connection. So five, if they're making eye contact with you and they're trying to access information, they they struggle a lot. So that whole like looking up thing is really common for fives, going back to the body language.
Okay.
Yes, a lot of us will look up if we're accessing a memory, but fives do it all the time, or they'll kind of like shift and look away or even close their eyes because they need to figure out the information that they need to bring forward. It
Ooh.
can take a five a long time to adapt their framework because that's what they're about. They're the framework builder. They know the rules. If something violates the rules, they're like, wait a minute, like
Yeah.
what's going on here? And they will go find the answer. Really, truly, some of the most help driven people, like they want to be of service. That's something that two and five have a lot in common with. Six is the chest. What's alive in the moment? Sixes can be movers and shakers, and they can be truth tellers. Like what they see as the truth is their truth in this moment. And so you really they'll deliver something that needs to be said. They can be great teachers and leaders because they're able to really hold the energy of who's in front of them because it's, what's right here, what's alive right now, and how do I then take that information and do something with it. So
Yeah.
they're also about engagement and movement and co-creating within a community. They really bring that community piece forward, often. Sevens are, Taylor Swift is a seven. Um, Sevens are genuinely probably our most sensitive emotionally. They feel things so deeply and they do not want you to know that. So sorry to our sevens for me calling out your secrets. But they are all about the possibility, the infinite possibility that exists. And
Yeah.
so where four drops inward and sees the infinite possibility within,
Yeah.
seven goes out and sees the infinite possibility for the world. And so they are change makers big time, and they tend to be the messenger that gets shot because
Mm,
they're the one that says the thing that really really needs to be said, that a lot of people are afraid to say. And then we're like, whoa, how dare you call out this clear problem, right?
yeah.
Um, because they ask this set of four questions of, is it good for the world? Is it good for me? Is it important or does it matter? And am I doing my best? And if they answer yes to all four, they're full steam ahead. If they get a no on any of those, they have to go back to the possibilities and kind of figure out, what's the next path forward.
Yeah.
But they do so deeply feel everything, and so they can be a little scared to express because they get this backlash when they do.
Sure.
Eights are the, and I think I mentioned seven's the third eye, so they're literally like casting out to the possibilities. Eight is the sacrum, so it goes down into the glute muscles.
Oh,
And eights like post down into the earth. They literally like are like a rock, and they root and they feel everything through their body. But when you want something done, you get an eight's help because they will feel the blockages in their body and they'll know we need to clear this blockage before we can move forward.
okay.
With that, they tend to, take more time to make their decisions because it has to feel really safe and anchored, and like they have the pathway, they know how to build the pathway, or the
Sure.
pathway's already built. But they're like strength and gentleness at the same time. And they have a bubble and they're like, don't come in my bubble.
Yeah.
Four has a bubble and they're like, come on into my bubble. Because they're about that connection, and an intimate connection, not necessarily in a sexual way, but a connection in like a, let's go deep together. Let's like really be authentic and have a real conversation. And
Yeah.
so you can feel like a four's best friend, whereas an eight, you're like, they're like, nope, don't come over here, please, thank you. And that's, so they teach us boundaries.
Yeah.
They teach us boundaries. That's their gift.
That's good.
And then nine is in the center of the back in the shoulder blades. And as I said earlier, nines are all about unity, balance, harmony, and not having a negative impact. When something gets really egregious is when a nine will be like, "Hey, you're really having a bad impact," and so similar to a seven, like we'll deliver the bad news if it's really bad, but otherwise we're just trying to balance the equation and make sure everyone is included. Inclusion is really really important for nines. So if they see someone being excluded from a group, they'll try and include them somehow, and fluidity and flow is really important to them. They tend to have, like I said, really passive faces when they're paying attention, very soft jaws, and the eyes can be pretty like wide but blank,
Okay.
looking. It
Mhm.
actually means we're paying attention though. So that is a super quick overview of all nine.
Props to you doing that, because I mean, I have that book. I meant to bring it in here. I should have had it next to me, but that book it's deep. Like there's a
Yes,
lot of information in there. I had to, as I've started to read it, I've had to read things multiple times because I'm like, wait a second, what? It's just
yes.
action packed with lots of information.
Review, action packed. I love that. I'm going to tell
Yes.
Susan her book is
There you
action
go.
packed.
Tell her. Yes.
And that's, she wrote that book, I think, in 2020 after studying it at that point, what, like 15-ish years. And by that point, she didn't have a community the way that she does now. So every day we are making new discoveries about this. And the thing that just have to say, I want anyone listening to hear is that this is really like you feel really skeptical about this until you get it in your body. And then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, that makes complete sense, and I can't unsee this now. It's
Yeah.
like once oh, that really is my center of power. Oh, I really do originate my movement from that place in my body. Oh, I really do see and use my eyes this way.
Yeah.
It's truly eye-opening. And I just can't wait for us to have more people that can bring this into the world because I think it could change school systems, family systems,
Oh,
communities,
yeah.
right? Like it could change the world.
I
Genuinely could.
100% agree. I mean, as you were talking today too, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I was starting to try to like think about some of the kids in my class. And I'm like, I wonder, they don't give eye contact. I wonder if that's because they're not a 1 through 4. Like, that's not like they're processing things instead of making that eye contact with me.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, like you said, and I,
Yeah. Whew. Try and make a natural number 6 student do something they won't want to do, they're going to throw a hissy fit. And that's completely natural to them because that's not what's alive in the moment for them. They're like, I don't want to do that. Why are you making me do that? That's an important lesson, first of all, for humanity, for us not to do things we don't want to do, right? 6 has that installed.
yeah.
And so that's the really cool thing is each number gives us a gift that we can then apply to our own life, even if we're not that natural number.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. It's kind of similar, like I said, at the get-go to Enneagram in that way. And like when you know about the other types, you can understand the people, your friends, family, coworkers, people that you work with, or just people in general, because you're like, okay, they're not doing that to piss me off. Like that is just who they are, as a
It's their
being.
nature.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's why we call it natural number, right?
right.
Because we're nurtured by our parents,
Yep.
usually to their number. And if we feel like we overlap a lot with another number, it's often because that was mom or dad or a best friend growing up or even one of our siblings. So we're really familiar with that energy.
Here's a like question out of left field that I just was thinking of, but I gotta ask this because there's probably nothing to this. But like when you look at a family, is there any connection between like, let's say, I don't know, mom's a 1, dad's a 2, brother and sister are 3? Like, are they that close, or is it usually they're all scattered? Or maybe
So
there is no connection. I don't know.
it's really interesting because we are like I've paid attention to that and noticed that there's a family in the community. Mom's a 5, dad's a 1, daughter is a 7. They're all 3 head numbers.
Okay.
That household and their shame, bless. Like but they know this, right? So they know how to navigate it better.
Right.
Um my siblings seem to be close. Like my sister's an 8 and my brother we haven't gotten him formally tested, not by me yet, but we're pretty sure he's a 6. Like he's got all the characteristics going on. We just need to get him confirmed. But so that's like 6, 8, 9 sort of, close, whereas we think my dad was a 1 and a 5. My
Okay.
mom's a 5. But what we see in these small families is that usually your kids will match either your like somewhere in your grandparents. Like the numbers tend to kind of repeat where they're staying in a family, kind of skipping generations as they shrink.
Interesting.
We also have very limited cases now where we have a family of like more than 10
Okay.
and the numbers start to repeat so far as we can tell in the same order after they reset. So it could have been like 2, 4, 8, 9, 1, so and then it just starts repeating again in the same order
Yeah.
after child 8 and 9 match the parents.
Okay.
So there seems to be some kind of patterning to it, but why? We have no clue. It's something we're, geeking out over here about trying to figure out. Like, is this grand design? Is this proof of God? Like, what?
Yeah.
Or is this proof of a simulation? We don't know. But the numbers, they don't repeat until they repeat, and then they tend to repeat in this interesting way. So,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah.
I love that. Who needs a book when you have Safrianna? She's got like all the information here. I'm like, I just keep rattling off these questions. I'm like, and this, and this. You are just a wealth of knowledge. How can the women listening, how can they connect with you? And do you also do like the typing? Can they come to you and have you do it?
Yeah. So At this stage, any in-person, so we're located in Maryland and we're starting to do in-person events over here. So if you are local-ish and you're like, oh my gosh, we want to get our whole family identified or we want to have a party and like get a couple people identified, like that's something we can do.
Okay.
In terms of online, we are starting to like take over doing some online identifications, still under supervision. Again, our supervisors have been working with this for 20 years, and something I can say about natural number nines, and this is just because we hold the universe. When new information comes in, it's usually like, oh, that makes sense. Like we just we know. We're like, okay. This is the hardest thing I've ever learned in my life. No lie. The
Imagine.
physiological parts of it. It is really intense. So I am still under supervision,
Okay.
but if people want to schedule with us, they're like super they want the Living Luna team. Living Luna is my brand.
Yeah.
They can go to livinglunas.com/body of nine. So it's
Yep.
all written out with the number nine,
Yep.
not Nine, but the number nine, body of nine. And they can schedule with me for a quick consultation to go over how we could set up a time for them and their family. Or you can go to bodyofnine.com and you
Yeah.
can sign up there to get identified. And then you could just leave a note like, would like Safrianna to help with this. But again, the best way right now would be to just go to livinglunas.com/body of nine, scroll all the way to the bottom. I do have a place to book directly with me. I would just have to cross check that either we're going to record it
Okay.
or get the supervisors on with us so that they can just be there to hold support.
Sure.
But yes, like Safrianna.com too is my other website. It doesn't mention Body of Nine at all, but it has my contact information and
Sure.
stuff.
Awesome.
But definitely reach out if you're curious.
Wow.
Schedule a 15-minute call to talk about how we can help you, your family, your
Oh,
corporation. Oh my gosh, this in a
wow.
business, like on
Yeah.
your team,
Yeah.
changes the way you do business. So
I'm
much stuff.
thinking, yeah, this can help in all areas of life. Yeah.
Want to use it for a retreat, right? That transformational flow literally
Yeah.
sets you up for a 3-day retreat. It's like there's so much to do with this. So basically, yeah, just reach out if this is like I want to know more and we can absolutely explore how to go way deeper.
Cool. Is there also, I was just thinking this too, like can you do like I don't know, like a couples
Mhm.
typing where you do each separately and then like talk about how the two
Yes, so
clash or
body
not clash?
through the Body of Nine website, you can schedule either your individual identification, your family identification, or a couple's
Okay.
identification. And again, if you like wanted to do that with me, we would just have to do the 15-minute consult. We'll figure out how to meet that need if you specifically want to work with us and our team.
Yeah.
But
Cool.
yes, that was basically with my partner, uh, where he turned to me and they're like, oh, natural number two. Like they could just tell right away. We then spent the rest of the session that we didn't need to do ID and we talked about how two showed up in the world and how, two and nine connect and all of that. So it's really that is it saves so many relationships. If you're actually willing to apply the information,
Yeah.
it saves relationships, it reignites them, it reminds you why you fell in love with them in the first place a lot of the time, right? Because you were naturally like, attracted to their natural
Hi.
spark.
Yeah. This is why your naturalness is why I love you.
Yes, and then we start to mask and put on faces and we hide our nature. So, because that's what society tells us to do.
Damn society.
That's my platform is like, let's ask questions about why society has done
That's
the
right.
things that it's done and come back to our authenticity and love ourselves.
Let's reclaim ourselves. Damn
Yes.
it. I love this. God, I love you. This is incredible. Safriana, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your gifts, your
Absolutely.
wisdom, and I'm so excited to continue to explore this. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you. I super appreciate the opportunity to talk about it and to, again, just inspire people to get curious about each
Yeah,
other. How are
that's
they different? How are they
yep.
using their eyes or not using their eyes? Just start to get more curious, and you've taken an important first step.
Go get curious. Yes. Yay.